research, and at the micro level, I analyzed how political leaders use language, including lexical choices, metaphors, legitimization strategies. If we begin with lexical choices and rhetorical strategies, it becomes evident that Lithuanian and Ukrainian political elites emphasize collective defense, European integration, and existential threat from Russia. In contrast, Hungarian political discourse prioritizes sovereignty, strategic autonomy, and resistance to external influence, particularly from the NATO and EU. Moving to the binary oppositions and metaphorical framing, we can observe that political discourse across all three countries or cases relies heavily on binary oppositions to construct security narratives and moral distinctions. Metaphorical language plays an important role in shaping perception, including expressions such as NATO's front line in the case of Lithuania, defending European values in the case of Ukraine, or Brussels bureaucracy, or energy blackmail, or stop the Brussels in the case of Hungary. Turning to the legitimization strategies, it becomes clear that Lithuania primarily relies on legal and democratic principles, emphasizing international law, EU and NATO commitments, and human rights in general. Hungary emphasizes sovereignty and legal autonomy, rejecting external interference, criticizing EU policy, particularly in relation to sanctions and migration issues. Meanwhile, Ukraine combines legal justification, such as self-defense, security narratives, and moral historical arguments. Now we are moving at the meso level, and at this level, I examine how political leaders construct cognitive frameworks. In other words, how they shape the way audiences interpret threats, responsibility, and political choices. At this point, focusing on security and threat narratives, we can observe that in Lithuanian and Ukrainian political discourse, narratives are reinforced through historical parallels, particularly references to the Soviet occupation and past struggles for independence, linking those past experiences to present threats. From a comparative perspective, we can see that in contrast to Lithuania and Ukraine, Hungarian leaders, they frame Western institutions, particularly the EU and NATO, as source of pressure that may threaten national sovereignty. And the discourse presents sanctions as economically harmful and ineffective, promoting a narrative of pragmatism as well as non-escalation. When examining the relationship between democracy and sovereignty, it becomes evident that in Lithuanian and Ukrainian discourse, security is framed as dependent on democratic values, international cooperation, and institutional alignment with the EU and NATO. In contrast, Hungarian discourse presents sovereignty as potentially conflicting with supranational democratic frameworks. At this point, I will turn to the macro level analysis of the findings. And at the macro level, in terms of geopolitical positioning, we can see that European Union and NATO are framed as essential for counterbalancing Russian aggression and maintaining the broader European security architecture. Meanwhile, Hungary does not reject EU and NATO membership, but frames participation as quite conditional, highlighting the importance of autonomy and national interests. Moving to the media circulation and institutional impact, We can note that Lithuanian and Ukrainian political narratives are often reinforced by national and Western media, which presents these countries as defenders of democratic values against Russian aggression. And in contrast, Hungarian political discourse is mediated through a more polarized media environment, which is quite important because where pro-government media amplifies sovereignty-based narratives. And finally, in my opinion, one of the most important point regarding public opinion and discourse alignment, and it is important to note or to highlight that in Lithuania, 76% perceive Russia as a threat, and 90% of people support NATO membership, indicating a strong alignment with security-focused political narratives. In Ukraine, 74 to 82% reject territorial concessions, and also 87% believe in successful resistance with the Western support. Meanwhile, in contrast, Hungarian public opinion shows that over 70% opposing involvement in the war and 86% rejecting NATO or EU troop deployment in general. And now, at the macro level, we can see that political discourse not only rejects not only reflects geopolitical realities, but actively contributes to shaping alliances, public opinion, and the broader European security architecture. In conclusion, I would like to summarize the main points as follows. Lithuanian and Ukrainian discourse is centered on democratic resilience, collective defense, and European integration, positioning both states as active defenders of Euro-Atlantic security order. They consistently frame Russia as an existential threat, using historical references, moral oppositions to reinforce this urgency and justify collective action. Also, they reinforce their positions with Euro-Atlantic structures supported by national and Western media narratives that amplify pro-democratic or pro-alliance discourse. And Hungary, in the contrast, operates within a more polarized media environment where sovereignty-based narratives are reinforced and contested. Overall, the study shows that security discourse in contemporary Europe is not merely a reflection of external threats, but an active mechanism for constructing those competing truth claims. And in digitally mediated environments, those narratives, they are amplified based on repetition, visibility, strategic framing, and contributing to, let's say, more contested interpretations, polarization, as well as in any kind of responsibility as well. We are talking about resilience, transparency, accountability, and future political communication consequences. To conclude, the study demonstrates that political discourse plays a central role in shaping how security, sovereignty, and democratic values are understood and contested in contemporary Europe. Thank you for your attention, and I will be willing to hear some questions.
We would like to thank the Professor Ruta Sutkete. Actually, she has made a great contribution in different terms, but I think there will be many questions or comments. Probably there will be after the all speakers. And now I would like to introduce the second professor, Raza Dobrishtiene. I am not quite sure whether Professor is here. I don't think that she is here right now. Maybe we can continue with the third speaker and PhD student Barbiero Andrea Gabriela. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
I'm honored to participate in this conference and thank you for the opportunity to present. I don't have a PPT presentation. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
My laptop is blocked.
We can hear you perfectly. There's no problem.
Okay. I don't hear you, but the topic of my presentation focuses on the relationship between television and the infocratic regime with emphasis on truth, visibility, and symbolic control. In society oriented toward data and optimization, television occupies a central position in organizing information and shaping public perception. Television selects topics, establishes hierarchies, and provides interpretative frameworks that structure social and political reality. Televised discourse assigns relevance to certain subjects and amplifies their emotional intensity. Through repetition and constant exposure, certain interpretations gain stability and legitimacy. The concept of the infocratic regime describes an order in which information functions as a strategic resource and visibility acquires that value of symbolic capital. In this context, truth is configured through media mechanisms. Truth appears as the result of selection, framing, and in the circulation of information in the public space. Visibility provides symbolic validation. Actors and topics that occupy media space gain authority and credibility. Television distributes this visibility and implicitly influences the relation of symbolic power. Symbolic control manifests through the setting of the public agenda and through the definition of the discursive framework. The methodology of this study includes a practical component based on the analysis of sequences of televised discourse from news program and debates. The selection of material focuses on topics with high visibility, such as political crisis, public scandals, or situation presented as breaking news. The analysis focuses on the construction of headlines on opening formulas that establish the initial meaning of the information. Headlines emphasize urgency, conflict, and dramatization. The structure of interventions highlights the alternation between information and commentary, while the order of presentation establishes the hierarchy or relevance. A relevant example is the coverage of a political crisis. Televised discourse personalizes the conflict, associates events with central figures, and uses recurring labels to define the situation. Selected guests support certain position and reinforce dominant interpretations. The repetition of these patterns stabilizes a particular version of reality in public perceptions. In the case of a public scandal, the emphasis falls on the emotional dimension and elements of media spectacle. The narrative includes clear opposition between guilty parties and victims, while visual and verbal sequences amplify tension. This construction contributes to increasing visibility and the symbolic validation of specific interpretations. The analysis also examines the distribution of the visibility, the frequency of appearances, positioning within the program, and duration of interventions indicate the level of credibility attributed to actors. This distribution reflects a mechanism of symbolic control and influences perception of legitimacy. The results of this practical component highlight the fact that television constructs reality through thematic selection, repetition, and emotional intensity. These mechanisms force the functioning of the infocratic regime and configure truth as a mediated and performative product. Therefore, the methodology of this study has a qualitative component and focuses on the analysis of televised discourse. I selected sequences from news bulletins and debate programs that address highly visible topics. I analyzed how these subjects appear in headlines, how messages are constructed, and the order in which information reaches the public. I examined the actors who receive visibility, the types of arguments used, and the emotional intensity of the discourse. For example, in the case of political scandal presented as breaking news, the headline introduced a conflict-centered frame, and subsequent intervention reinforced the same interpretation. The repetition of messages and the selection of guests supports a particular version of reality. A short example: in a political scandal, television invites the same analyst who support the same position. The same idea appears in the headline and in the commentary. In a repetition creates. The repetition creates the impression on of an evident reality. In an economic crisis, for example, headlights highlight losses and risk, invite analysts support the same interpretation regarding the severity of the situation. The repetition of these ideas consolidates the perception of general states of insecurity. And another relevant example, in the case of health-related topic, television promotes certain opinions through the selection of experts. The same specialists appear frequently and support the same interpretative direction. Constant visibility legitimizes this perspective in the eyes of the public. In conclusion, television holds a strategic role within the infocratic architecture. It actively participates in shaping symbolic power and in modeling the contemporary public sphere. The main mechanisms are selection of topics, hierarchy of information, interpretative framework, repetition of messages, selection of guests, emotional intensity, and distribution of visibility. Understanding this mechanism offers an essential perspective on the relationship between media, truth, and society. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, we would like to thank Andrea Gabriela Barbiero. Actually, she has made a kind of discussion about how actually TV reshapes our perception, but at the same time, it functions as a kind of construction of infocatic society in digitized space. There can be many questions about that, especially in terms of how actually TV reshapes the symbolic power for today's world, and how actually does it reshape and again for emotional constructions for the knowledge. I will be happy to hear more about those questions, but maybe we can continue with other speakers, and after that we will come into the other points. Now actually, the last speakers are Carmen Fernandez and Vanessa Sanchez. I remember that I already mentioned about their title, their presentation title. Now the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are you listening me? The presentation is good?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Dear members of the Committee and Faculty of Communication, I would like to express first my gratitude to Istanbul Aydin University, a Faculty of Communication, and the Committee of the International Communication, Digitalization, and Society Symposium for organizing this event. My name is Vanessa Sanchez. I, along with my colleague Carmen Beatriz Fernandez, we are pleasure to present our research titled Viral News on the 2024 Presidential Elections, setting the agenda through social media. Okay. Our research article examines the impact of viral social media news on agenda setting and public opinion during Venezuela's 2024 presidential elections. Using agenda setting theory, the study explored how digital platforms structure political discourse through hybrid media system, algorithmic amplification, and media engagement. We apply a mixed methods approach to analyze 419 viral news from Instagram and Facebook, combining engagement metrics with AI-based sentiment analysis. A significant methodological aspect of this research was the use of CrowdTangle Meta's tool. This tool was discontinued shortly after the election, so this study represents one of the final opportunities for independent, large-scale electoral analysis using this specific data source. Our findings indicate that while the government-aligned content dominated in volume, it primarily generated negative sentiment. Conversely, opposition content achieved higher organic engagement and positive resonance. We conclude that the combination of virality and sentiments provides a more accurate measure of public opinion than visibility alone. So this research specifically addressed the following research question. First, is virality a way of setting the agenda for candidates? And second one, is virality a proxy for citizens' electoral opinion climate? But before presenting the result, it's important to understand the political context in Venezuela. Venezuela has been experiencing a political crisis for the last 20 years. The Bolivarian Revolution, initiated by Hugo Chavez in 1998 and continued after his death by Nicolas Maduro, his successor, has led years of shortage, hyperinflation, human rights violation, persecution for leaders, and the migration of 8 million people. This situation has now reached of 2023. The Democratic opposition held primaries October 2023. Maria Corina Machado, now Nobel Prize Peace, she won the primary election with 92% of support, but she was not able to run the presidential election because she was disfranchised by the Supreme Court. So the National Electoral Council authorized the registration of Edmundo González Urrutia as candidate of the opposition with Maria Corina Machado's approval. Additionally, more than 400 independent media outlets has been shut down by the government in the last 2 decades. So at least 285 radio stations, 87 newspapers, and 19 free-to-air television channels has been silenced. For this reason, this research involved an analysis of the official media accounts belonging to Maduro, Nicolas Maduro for the government side, as well as those of opposition figure Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo González. The methodology. Well, the sample was designed with a corpus of 419 viral news stories that were identified through the CrowdTangle tool on Instagram and Facebook platform during the electoral campaign period from June 12 to July 26, 2024. Classification and quantification. The news virality trends were classified according to their political actor sender, government or opposition, and theme. The interaction ratio of official account was measured, organic virality rates were calculated, and social humor sentiment was analyzed. Political accounts also were analyzing content by government, Nicolás Maduro, and content by the opposition, María Corina Machado and Edmundo González, on Instagram and Facebook. Then we took an example of 28 viral news related to polls was examined, and AI sentiment analysis to complete the quantitative research, positive, negative, and neutral sentiment were analyzed using an artificial intelligence model, ChatGPT, to evaluate the tone, the content of the comments on viral posts. And the main scope was to identify the predominant emotions, opinion, and narratives among users, distinguishing between content virality and its receptions. We used 3 parameters: virality news with CrowdTangle, interactions of the political accounts with CrowdTangle, and we analyzed the social humor using AI ChatGPT for the comments. The first parameter, viral news. Based on the analysis of viral news using CrowdTangle, data indicates that Venezuelan government, it means Maduro, dominate the media agenda. Of the 419 viral news stories sampled, 238 were attributed to the government, while 181 pertaining to the opposition. This distribution represents 56.8% of total virality for government-related content, compared to 43.2% for the opposition. Furthermore, the virality proxy was found to be higher for government narratives. Out of the 490 viral news items analyzed, 238 were identified with a government-related. Analysis of the associated comments indicate a predominant atmosphere of rejection and skepticism regarding the veracity of official reports. The general tone was notably negative, characterized by fatigue and sarcasm. A primary example of this trend was the viral promotion of the film Nicolás, a pro-government producer centered of the life of President Nicolás Maduro. Despite achieving a significant reach, the audience response was largely negative. On the other hand, with the opposition, of the 490 viral news stories analyzed, 181 were associated with opposition narratives. With this example, reach was primarily driven by themes of hope, change, and international validation. For example, the New York Times article regarding María Corina Machado achieving a virality score of 16.8. Furthermore, narratives denouncing persecution, such as the report of the arrest of María Corina's horde, saw significant engagement with virality score of 128.9. The sentiment analysis confirmed a strong correlation between opposition viralities and positive supportive commentaries. Additionally, independent accounts and citizens platforms successfully mitigate the lack of the traditional information source. The official accounts of María Corina Machado and Edmundo González Urrutia serve as primary resource for information. So the results from this first parameter, the fragmented public sphere. Public discourse was currently characterized by polarized affected publics, where emotional rhetoric and election denialism often take precedence over constructed deliberation. Propaganda backslash. State-sponsored branding efforts appear to be provoking resistance rather than establishing the intended legitimacy. Social media influence. Given the censorship of traditional media, social media platforms, especially Instagram and especially comment sections, have become primary venues for expressing opposition to the government, and social media as primary information source. The official accounts of María Corina Machado and Edmundo González serve as the main information source for opposition electorate. This shift explains the viral reach of their posts as the function of the essential alternative to restricted traditional outlets. Interaction analysis. Maria Corina and Edmundo Gonzalez consistently dominated Instagram with a combined 89 shade of voice. Although Edmundo Gonzalez's account was established in April 2024, it means 2 months before the elections, with initially low engagement, his presence grew significantly after the election approached, driven by opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. So she transferred the legitimacy and the leadership to him. In contrast, Maduro maintained an 11% of share of voice in this platform, even he was the president. On the other hand, on Facebook, Maduro held a landed share of voice at 68%, while Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez reached 32%. However, despite Maduro's strong performance on Facebook, the overall impact was lower compared to the amplification power observed on Instagram platform. Interactions. Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez lead interactions on Instagram. Maria Corina Instagram accounts generated the most interactions, demonstrating that her content is not only visible but also very engaging for her audience in this platform. Edmundo Gonzalez's interaction rate on Instagram was remarkably high, suggesting that when his content reached the audience, it was highly effective. Although Maduro had more followers than Edmundo Gonzalez, his interaction on Instagram was low. On the other hand, Maduro was stronger on Facebook, but again, his impact compared with Instagram was lower. So the results of this parameter giving us that Instagram was the most important social media platform as source of information during presidential campaign. It was the network where news went quickly viral, and the audience impact was 10 times higher than Facebook. Second, Maria Corina and Edmundo Gonzalez lead interactions on Instagram. Maria Corina's Instagram account generated the most interaction, demonstrating that her content is not only visible but also very engaging for her audience on this platform. Instagram as a primary source of information about leaders. The Instagram account of opposition leader Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez became reliable source of information, increasing their interactions, engagement, and followers. Maria Corina dominated the conversation between likes and comments. In this case, she generated a total of more than 13 million of interactions. In the case of the candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, Instagram account generated 4 million interactions, and Maduro Instagram account reached a total of 1.5 million interactions. The difference is bigger. So at the end, Instagram as a bridge connecting the migrant diaspora with voters inside Venezuela, bypassing information blockers and censorship. Viral posts, the last item, the parameter. We have analyzed a sample of 28 viral news stories concerning polling leaders and election projections. Our findings indicate a frequent use of elaborate polls or pseudo-polls to generate misleading headlines and spread misinformation. Of the 28 stories reviewed, 18 cited polls claiming that Maduro was set to win the election. It means 64%, while 10 reference independent polls identified Edmundo Gonzalez as favorite, only 36%. When we analyzed these polls, we found that pro-government 6 polls were invented, 3 polls were official, 4 pseudo polls, and 3 from real pollsters using misleading information. And pro-opposition, only 10 independent pollsters. This is an example of the fakes or misleading information that was spread. So we analyzed the social humor using AI ChatGPT to analyze the comment. And we found that there was a strong distrust on the media and the polls presented, with a marked inclination in favor of Edmundo González as presidential candidate on the comments. Although polls generate virality, they did not show any change among electoral political behavior, suggesting that virality was not a proxy for citizens' electoral opinion climate. So we found that these narratives express distrust on the media and polls, the constantly support for Edmundo González, especially in the comments, the discontent with the current situation of the country, and the use of the humor and skepticism as a way to express the opposition to the government. The conclusions? Well, this study concludes that in a context of high democratic and media restrictions like Venezuela, the analysis or organic virality and sentiment in social media comments constitute a reliable barometer of public sentiment and a valid indicator of the electoral opinion climate. The officialist virality was associated with the rejection of the candidate, while that of the opposition was mostly positive and hope. For this part, the opposition uses social networks to make its campaign visible in the face of the censorship, especially Instagram. Early conclusions showed that viral news and comments were reliable indicators of how candidates try to set agenda, and allowed them to understand where the opinion of the electorate is leaning. The evidence demonstrates a critical dissociation between the government digital strategy and the public opinion. Maduro low interaction rate compared to the high rate of Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo González, coupled with the sentiment of rejection detained in the comments on government content. Therefore, virality not only reflects the opinion climate but also exposes the profound inability of an authoritarian regime to generate genuine acceptance, even when it dominates the information space. And finally, the discontinuation of CrowdTangle tool in 2024, permanently closed on August 14, represents a profound setback for academic inquiry and democratic accountability. Without it, independent researchers lose the ability to systematically monitor how information circulates, how narratives are amplified, and how disinformation is spread through Meta's platforms. This accent creates a data opacity gap, concentrating informational power in corporate hands and restricting the capacities of civil society and academia to measure digital influence and public opinion information. So thank you very much.
Actually, we thank you, Vanessa Sanchez and Carmen Fernandez, for their presentation, for their paper. And there must be many questions actually surrounding us right now, because you have actually broadened the topic with a very political sense. At the same time, in terms of the political discourse are on the stage to understand more about how actually social media operates nowadays. Maybe the last speaker, I'm not quite sure whether Associate Professor Raza Dobrinskiene is here. I don't think so. All right, now I can open the question and answer part and Q&A session. Is there any question or comment among our listeners? Maybe I can directly jump into some aspects from your papers from the last speakers, because for me there are many thought spectrums here. And you have mentioned how actually the media represents a governmental election and political representatives within different senses. And you have also emphasized three main agents and political actors in Venezuela. If I rightly remember their names, one is about Maria Corina Machuda, and the other one is about the Madura, and the third one is about Edmundo Gonzalez. Is that correct? And those names are very prominent names in the Venezuela's governmental history for the understanding of how actually media represents their ideologies within different senses. My question is that when we look at the interaction relations, there are different kinds of degrees between those actors, because you have also mentioned about the Maria Corina Machuda is a kind of higher level of interaction in terms of social media compared to Edmundo Gonzalez and Madura's interaction rates in the social media. I'm really curious about how gender-specific terms might be effective for these kinds of interaction, because when we look at the other representatives, the Maria Corina Machuda is a woman representative, right? It's a woman actor. So how actually this interaction could be playing a role for these kinds of understanding in the media? Is this a kind of vital role here in terms of gender-specific actor or not? That would be my question. Thank you.
Well, it wasn't a very complicated situation because Maria Corina won the primary elections, but she cannot run for a presidential election. So, because she was disfranchised by the Supreme Court. So, the media cannot even mention her in any TV show, radio station, interview, nothing, without any campaign. Even she cannot pay, for example, any campaign on traditional media. So the National Electoral Council only leave to register and a person that it was completely unknown for everyone, because it was an old person, diplomatic, and doesn't have any political life active. So it was completely unknown person. So the phenomenon here that Maria Corina Machado, without media, without advertising in campaign, traditional media or platform like social media, she can transfer her leadership to this person, to Edmundo Gonzalez, in just 2 months. This person even doesn't have any social media account, only 2 months, opened 2 months before the election, and she can transfer her leadership to this person, and their two political accounts on Instagram and Facebook, they became the primary source for electorate to understand this complicated situation. And the 8 million people that live outside the country, they play a role like a bridge between what's happening in the activities for the campaign, because she cannot take any flight in the country for the political restrictions. So nobody knows completely which is gonna be the activities or the political campaign. So only the main source for information was only Instagram and WhatsApp, but we cannot have any data from WhatsApp, so we emphasize on Instagram and Facebook. And was Instagram the most important, and she used it to spread the all information of the campaign. And Carmen Beatriz, yes, complete, please.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Tugba. Yes, in addition of what Vanessa is telling us, it is important to know that during the campaign there was a gender issue, but mostly related with the issues, with the strategic messages that were oriented and were centered around feminine values, mostly the family values, reunification of society, the depolarization, that can be considered feminine values in a broad sense. However, in this study that we did regarding the interaction of the social media, was mostly about leadership, playing leadership, not gender related. I think we didn't find out any gender related issue strictly regarding the interactions.
It's very interesting. I think the term here, the visibility, must be one of the key terms, because Vanessa has also mentioned about that invisibility was there before the campaign. Maybe there can be some kind of parallel lines between gender-specific terms at some points, at some levels, but of course it needs to be broadened and broadened in deeper sense. Then we can go into the concept of visibility. Who counts as visible? Who counts as invisible during those times? So it's always questionable, even the context where we live in today and around the world. I think there are many questions about this concept. Therefore, it's for me always interesting to see who is counted as relevant during these election times, or who are just out of those voices to be counted. Thank you for opening this path. Maybe I don't know whether Vanessa. Yes, please. You want to say something, I guess.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I guess in following your idea, I guess we have here two ways of invisible. First one, the legal, with the differentiate of the Supreme Court, and the second one with the censorship to mention and giving a space to her in the traditional media. So that is when the social media platform became as primary source to express the information.
So Vanessa, you are defining traditional media as mainstream media, or do you have a kind of specific term for that, or is it another kind of media?
Well, as mentioned at the beginning, traditional media have been silenced in the country. More than 400 media outlets are silenced for the censorship. But even during this time of the campaign, and even all this time, she cannot be mentioned in the traditional medias.
All right. I think it's really challenging to go further and further. And when we deepen, we see the different aspects, how actually media operates. And there are also parallel lines when I think about the concept, other parts of the world, about the concept of the media. But Carmen has also mentioned about there's also this femininity and the family roles to define the political leaders. And this must be also kind of line. And thank you for that. But I think I can also draw a line for Barbiera's point here in terms of visibility. I'm really wondering about how, Barbiera, are you here? I don't know whether you are here still, but how would you define the visibility in TV programs? Do you define the visibility within the sense of the agents, or as a kind of thought or practice of the thought? How would you define it? Thank you.
Television functions simultaneously as a window to the world and as a mirror of society, using cinematic techniques to construct visual and emotional experiences. Imagine the following scene: an ordinary family in the evening. In the living room, in the background, the television broadcasts the news, political debates, international conflicts, pandemics, climate change. These experiences penetrate directly into the life and the consciousness of viewers, demonstrating the television's ability to connect the audience with global realities. Television provides access to protest, natural disaster, or social campaigns, creating a cinematic experience of the world. This window becomes a mediated and directed space in which what reaches the public reflects editorial choices, ideological orientations, and narrative structures inspired by cinema. Television discourse adopts cinematic techniques such as montage to create tension and rhythm, expressive framing, which conveys subtle emotions, music and sound, which enhance the scene's mood, narrative pacing, which engages the audiences in the story, performative discourse through presenters or actors' expressions and gestures. These elements create a mediated social reality in which the viewer recognizes, understands, and interprets daily life. Every frame, sound, or narrative rhythm conveys a subtle message that influences how the audience perceive the world. These techniques led the audience to perceive events as real, become emotionally involved, and interpret the conveyed message. When watching a series or a program, every frame, sound, music, and narrative rhythm contributes to this experience, transforming viewing into a cinematic experience integrated into everyday life. Social validation becomes a central element. Marginalized participants or those from difficult backgrounds temporarily become models of success and sources of inspiration for the audience. In television uses cinematic techniques to construct a mediated social reality in which the audience does not only receive information or entertainment, but experiences a visual and emotional narrative that shapes social perception and values. This is my idea.
Yeah, giving your I think you seem to mention that the visibility has a kind of dynamic for audiovisual understanding and perception through the TV. So this is a kind of challenge for seeing the cinematographic functions and how actually this audiovisual dynamics operate for reshaping the reality and our perceptions in our daily life. Sometimes when we watch the TV shows, it looks like they're all normal happening there. But when we just go back and try to understand ourselves, as audiovisual components directly have an influence on our way of thinking in our daily life, and maybe changing our habits and daily habits, the way how we dress and how we look, and it's directly reflected upon the how we feel and emotionally. Is it also one of the points that you want to reveal? I'm not quite sure, but I think there is a kind of link here in terms of the visibility and audiovisual functions of the TV program. Thank you. I don't know whether there might be any, yes, please, whether there might be any questions. Please feel free to ask or make any comments. All right, maybe for the last speaker, maybe I can ask a question, which I'm curious about. Actually, she was the first speaker, and thanks for her patience for that. And you have mentioned about the different understanding for and different ideological motivations for Ukrainian-Russian war. If I try to understand, I see different reactions in the media for Russian perception and Russian position within this war. And you have also bring the cases of Lithuania and Hungary and Ukrainian position for media representation, media understanding, ideological position for Russia. And you have said that Lithuania and Ukraine have somehow something in common for Russia. I don't know whether it's political or whether they might be another positional role here, but you mentioned that is a kind of, they regard Russian position as a kind of security threat for their own logic and political logic. And you also mentioned that Hungary has a kind of different dimension here within the terms of just seeing there's a kind of sovereignty aspects for Russia. When we look at this picture, and clearly, I'm not quite sure how I could understand. Do you think that this media representation is a part of political position of those countries, or are there any kind of motivations behind it? Thank you. That would be my question. I think I have more than these questions, but I don't want to take more time for now. Thank you, Ruta.
Thank you for a nice question. It is quite a complicated question as well. I could agree, but if I understand you correct, it's more about actual policy outcomes as well. So, what I would like to emphasize that political narratives usually influence or there is this assumption that influence real political outcomes through a multi-level process. So at the cognitive level, they shape how audiences interpret threats and priorities. At the social level, they influence public opinion and media framing. And at the institutional level, they contribute to the legitimizing specific policy decisions. So, for example, framing, we are more talking about framing the war, Russia-Ukraine war, as an existential threat, supports also policies such as military aid and NATO integration, while, for example, sovereignty-centered narratives, they might justify more cautious or non-escalatory approaches in general. So let's say that this demonstrates that discourse does not only reflect political reality, but also actively shapes policy directions and some kind of geopolitical alignment as well. And let's say that this media framing also affects the agenda of the parliament's decisions, policy stances, goals, and so on. Because even if we are talking about the support for the NATO, so now in the Lithuanian case, we are devoting a very huge percentage of national budget to the NATO support, while before the war, we were not able to reach that minimum 2% per state. So let's assume that it might have some influence on agenda regarding the politicians' decisions, policies, implications, and so on.
Thank you. I think it's crystal clear from your position and how you actually read those representations, especially you mentioned about the agenda of the political parties and how actually they reshape those understandings through the newspapers and through public opinion. Because the public discourse is also, I think, another key term here. Public discourse is directly affected by the need, not only the newspapers, especially the agenda of how the political parties justify their actions, and within the principle sense and within their policies to the society. So that there's a kind of triangle here, I think, that how actually media and public and governments operate together and dialectically within this discourse for the justificatory position. Thank you for this inspiring and opening mind session. And I would like to thank all speakers within their different contributions. I will be happy to hear more about the comments. If there are any other comments or questions, I will be happy. But as a head of the Department of Radio, Television and Cinema in English from Faculty of Communication, Istanbul University, I would like to thank all participants and speakers for this session and for their different insights and inspiring talks. Thank you. I hope we can see each other again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again next year during the 5th Symposium as well.
We will be happy to host you here again. Thank you. Thank you all speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You are